Lovely, lovely. Welcome, everybody, to our fifth Short History of the World class of this great fall 2025 semester. And I'm thrilled to see quite a number of students in person right now for today's class. We are back more or less as we should be while we're dealing with the strike that's happening here, the turbulence or volatility that is always part of our lives today. What I'd like to do today before we begin is just make sure that everything is technically set up properly. Just double check, because I've kind of jerry-rigged a workaround. Because I don't have tech support at all at the moment, they're out on the picket line, I have to make sure that what I've set up will work. So far, so good. I'm a great believer that in crisis, there is always opportunity. As one famous figure in history said, I think it was Franklin Roosevelt, the American president during the Second World War, in which the Americans, Canadians, and British and others came together to defeat the fascist forces in Europe. He said that one should never let a good crisis go to waste. It's a cliche. You probably have heard it before. Never let a good crisis go to waste. And so in a way, what you're doing is watching me right now do that today. We have a little bit of a crisis on the campus right now with lack of tech support. And it's affecting many people. And I know from students that many of you are upset about this. And I could try and take some time to explain why you need to understand more about why they're out on the picket line, but I'm not going to do that. That's something else. The point is that this presents a bit of a crisis for me as your professor, and I've been dealing with it this semester by having the classes from my sunroom at home, where I can control things a little bit better and also show my support for my colleagues on the picket line, because the IT folks and media services technicians who've helped me build this classroom over the last years are not with me. They are my team members. I support them. It's very, very difficult for me to come here today in person and cross a picket line. That's what I've done. However, my colleagues on the picket line understand this. I brought them some apples and spoke with them, and they know that ultimately you are the ones who matter the most, even though they are fighting for their future and for many things that I wish we could talk about, but that's another discussion. Unless you want to talk about it, I have a class to teach. But they understand that the reason I walked across the picket line today to come in here in person to be with you is because of you. And they know that ultimately this campus is all about you, the students. Some of them are a little bit upset that many students don't seem to understand what they're doing out there and are quite hostile and frustrated with this. Just know that that act of me stepping through the picket line today, coming here to be with you, is a statement in support of you. And the fact that they understand that and were absolutely fine with that is also a statement in support of you, ultimately. But I just want you to know that for me to be standing here at the podium today, having an in-person class, is there's a lot of meaning behind this, you know, and so I am going to move on, but I'm going to just remind you that there is a technical crisis that I am facing with this classroom that I have helped to build and bring attention to the college for. I've been instrumental in building this over the years, and I've done it in in collaboration with some very good technical people here now. But now I'm flying solo, completely solo, in a room that is extremely technically sophisticated. And when it works, it's outstanding. We get attention from people around the world, and people know that we're building something here new and important. But right now, I'm a one-man band completely. And so what I've done today is kind of try and take advantage of this a little bit. And I brought my iPhone in, and normally there are cameras up here on the ceiling that, you know, will help pick up the view of the students, but they've never been as good as I wanted them because they're kind of up in the ceiling shooting down at the students. Now I've got my iPhone here today, and here's what I'm doing is I can actually click over here, and you will see the students more at their eye level. As a matter of fact, if you want to have fun with this today, everybody, the students here can take this camera off the little stand here, hit the microphone icon, and talk to it as if they're talking to everybody out there too. But you don't have to do that. For now, I can control this and show everybody online that you're here, and we can try and be a little more interactive. But I still have many audio problems on how to do this. So essentially, I have to stand here and make sure that the microphone in my laptop is picking up the audio clearly. And if you speak and we begin to interact and it gets really good, as it should, then I might have to get this microphone from here into the group somehow. Anyways, we'll deal with it as it happens. I will say finally that I'm not going to force anybody out there right now who's sitting around the couches to come sit on the couches. But normally, for this classroom to really come alive, the students sitting around there should come and sit in the couches, and we should fill them up, and then we can have really good discussion and interaction close up. So I'm going to ask any of you who would like to really be part of the conversation today to come and sit on the couches with the students here. But if you don't want to, I'm not going to force you, okay? So let me come back to here for now, and I will bring back the map, and then we can carry on right now with this. As we today begin to enter a new chapter in the story called Awakenings of Power, and begin to look at a world that all of you love to explore. I know this. It's called the Greco-Roman world, or ancient Greece and ancient Rome, and why they are so important to the story of civilization and how they awakened us to a power. I would like to stop and check and see if anybody has any questions about anything. And I want to make sure we're all on track. There's so much that is in my mind right now technically, and the bandwidth in my brain may not be sufficient to handle all the technical things I'm trying to keep up, like plates, you know, those plates spinning when somebody has a thing where they have, you know, one pole and there's a plate going and then there's another pole. Have you ever seen that? Somebody do that? I feel like right now from a technical standpoint, I got about 10 plates going, and I'm afraid one of them is going to crash. That's the technical part of this class. I'm trying to keep the video conference going, this going, YouTube going, this, and they're all not connected. And one day maybe we will connect them with an algorithm and it will be great. But for now, they're up there. But I want to just not think about that technical part and get to the content and be with all of you. So let me just hope that those plates won't crash. Stay up there, guys. Keep spinning for the next 90 minutes. And let me get to the students. Do any of you have anything you would like to say, any questions, anything that's confusing you about anything? I want to make sure you're clear. Okay? We're good? Okay? In the cosmos, in the planets, on YouTube, all of you little planets are actually arranged horizontally. If you watch on YouTube, we see it vertically here, but Kevin, well, if you go to YouTube now, you watch all of them online, the planets or the icons are horizontal. So when you watch the recording, it looks like I'm talking to them. They're below me, and they're kind of just behind the couches. Anyways, you'll eventually start to realize there's a lot of method in this madness that I'm trying to create, which is to really build the world's first classroom for humanity that is going to allow all people on the planet to connect and interact with really smart professors and students in a multimedia format that will make education exciting. That's what I'm trying to innovate here. But it's slow. So out there in the cosmos on YouTube, as I'm looking down at you right now, anything, guys? In the live chat, let's see if there's anything coming in. I would assume Shamim, for example. Shamim, do you hear me clearly from the podium? Let's see what happens in the chat. Yes? Planet SP. Has that planet been evacuated? Or is there a person there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Shamim. For some reason, and this means the gods are with us today, or the God is with us. This is connected to the speaker over here, which means you... Anyways, let me just get back to the content, not get crazy about tech. Shamim, could you stay on your microphone, please? Great. Shamim, how are you today? Okay, Shamim has gone back to live chat. Fine. As long as everybody, I know you can hear me, and Ava and Arifa and Innocent and all the others, if you can't hear me or see the map behind me, please let me know in the live chat, okay? Let's get to the real important part of today's class, which is I would like to review with all of you here now, first, what we did last week. And last week, I kind of flipped the classroom a little bit, and I asked you to watch a recorded lecture after. Do you remember we had the class in the sunroom? So here comes a moment of truth for me, and I'm ready to face the truth. How many of you actually watched the recorded lecture? Avery Rose, I have no doubt. She is so plugged in to this class, but there is more. Is it Nora? Way to go, Nora. Okay. Who else? Roxalana. Lovely. Okay. One of my favorite songs from years ago from the Police. Roxanne. There's a, there are many other Police songs that I really like. Okay, so Avery Rose, Nora, Roxalana. Kevin, did you have a chance to check in with that? Okay. Okay, because I'm going to need to review a few critical details about last week's birth of civilization before we get into the kind of acceleration of civilization that's about to happen. We're getting into the really interesting part of the course, which is what do humans do? What societies grow? Who has the power? Which empires begin to emerge and which don't? Who wins the wars and who doesn't? And then through this all, how is humanity evolving? So I set the stage for you in the last 2 or 3 weeks on how did nature take shape. Now we're going to look at the most advanced form of nature, which is us, the humans. So there's a lot that we're going to cover in the next weeks. It just is telescoped around 5,000 or 6,000 years. That's all we're going to be talking about, essentially, going all the way up until the 21st century. And I'm going to take you chronologically through. So I'm going to stick them with the students who watched the recorded lecture from last week to sort of help answer some questions, okay? So it would be Nora, Roxalana, Avery Rose, and anybody else that wants to try and answer this. But for example, I'll go with default because I know she's probably going to know. I'll start with Avery Rose. She's been writing some very good stuff too. Avery Rose, what do we kind of call the starting line in this story? The starting line. Yeah, based on and the recorded lecture that you watched. What is sort of we would generally call the starting line? It's okay.
But I'd say it was the agricultural revolution. Because right out of that,
Yep. Agricultural revolution.
Out of that, the first homes, the first permanent homes.
Yep.
Then came like songs like villages, out that empires, and it just grew out of there.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to do to help all of you, okay, to keep this moving. We're going to spend about 10 or 15 minutes right now reviewing the birth of civilization through the most important moment, the starting line of civilization, which is the beginning of food production or agriculture. How we did that, how we humans did that. That I covered last week in the recorded lecture, but I'm going to review it a little bit, and I'm going to do it by first, before I forget, getting the note taker. There's going to be a student who's going to go over there to the board and write down some critical information. This is working, that board, not completely, but it's working enough. And it's not going to be Avery Rose, it's not going to be Nora, and it's not going to be Roxalana. It's going to be another student who needs to know this stuff and doesn't right now, okay? So we're going to help that student. So stay here. I have to stay from the microphone. Usually I have it on my head and I'm walking around. Right now, yes. What's your name?
Olive.
Olive. That's Olive. Oh, way to go, Olive. Way to go. Now I see a face. Nice to meet
I
you.
swear I put my camera on it.
Oh, and Olive, but it's Olive, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
for Olive.
Way to go, Olive. Olive's another student who's been really plugged in too, in terms of engaged, but did not watch the recorded lecture. Olive.
Well, I did forget about the.
Okay. So nobody's losing any marks, and I don't want to, put you on the spot too much, but thank you for getting ready to write the notes. Do you know how to write them on that? Just go, okay, yeah, you can do that. And then you know how to rub the thing off? Yeah, okay. In fact, I can make, just a second, I'm walking over here to help Olive, okay, the laptop, the microphone, so to get it fit. So you can do this.
Oh,
yeah, okay. That's the thing. And then, yeah, there we go. Okay.
Oh, that's nice. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And then we'll get your names on the board after for our on board. Okay, let's just get to the content because I'm sick of these plates. Stay up there, plates. Do not crash. Nothing's crashed yet. YouTube is not crashed. I'll just do a quick check. No, YouTube is not crashed. Okay, good. So, okay. Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, it helped me with, exactly. Perfect. Review. Could you please write down review on this? And write down underneath that the starting line, which is food production. Now, I'm going to help those students who didn't watch the recorded lecture, okay? You need to, guys, okay, if you really want to do well in this course. But I know everybody's under a lot of pressure. I shouldn't have to review to this extent, but I will because you need to know this. It's critical information, okay? I'm not going to ask the students who watch the recorded lecture to do this. I'm going to do it myself, so it's fast, all right? Human beings invented agriculture. And essentially, they invented it 10,000 years ago. And you can write down 10,000 YA. We'll use YA as an abbreviation for years ago. If I'm going too fast, just raise a hand, okay? But I want to move through this as quickly as I can. And if you're having trouble with it, there's always the recording, and you can watch it later, and there are notes as well, and we can help Olive put those down too. But that's good, okay? Take as much as you can, and we'll review that later, okay, Olive? Not to worry if you can't get things down. What happened was there were a series of heartlands in the world. That's what we call heartlands. Areas in the world where the soil was richer than other areas. Very simple. Now, it's really important that you keep your eyes focused on the map today, or you keep the map in your imagination. I don't want to stress what I'm about to stress, but I need to, which is you need to concentrate and focus. You are now watching a story in which we humans, we primates, the most advanced of all living things with the most dense brains on this planet, figured out how to gain greater and greater power on this planet. And they started with food production or agriculture. If you find yourself not able to focus, it means many things. You may have a disability I need to help you with privately, but it might mean something that all of us suffer from. We live in a time where the machines that we have created, the technologies that we have created, are commanding our attention so much that we are losing our ability to focus. Humans are being increasingly replaced by the tools that they have created. And what you are now about to see in the story of civilization, starting 10,000 years ago with food production, is we humans began to invent things in incredible ways. We began to invent new systems and new tools and machines that will allow us to create an advanced civilization on planet Earth. You're going to see how that happened, starting with food production. But ultimately, what I want you to remember is that you are seeing us humans figuring out how to create powerful tools. And 10,000 years later, here we are on planet Earth, and our tools are so powerful that they're beginning to replace us. We have to stop that. So whenever you find yourself in this classroom beginning to drift off, that's okay, drifting off. But when you find yourself going online into your computer and checking websites and finding yourself distracted, that means that your machine has got control of you. If you're on your laptop now or on your phone and you're taking notes, great. If you're on your laptop and you're doing other work for other courses, then you shouldn't be in this room right now. I want to make this clear. I feel very passionately that we're living at a very monumental time on this planet in which the creatures, we humans, the most advanced of all living things, are at a moment when we're beginning to create artificial forms of intelligence that are smarter than we are. What are we going to do about that? What I'm going to help you to understand is there's a story of how that happened. It's called A Short History of the World, and it's a story of civilization. And it's a story that begins largely with food production. How did we do that? How did we begin to figure out that we didn't need to chase after animals anymore in the wild? How did we figure out that we could go into the wild and take seeds that were growing naturally and take them back to a farm somewhere and begin to grow the things that we needed? This took enormous brain power. No other animal on this planet has been ever able to figure that out. And it's because of your brains. It's because of your ability to see things in nature that you can begin to manipulate and shape for your own power. And that is why world historians like the great one, William McNeill, Rise of the West, History of the Human Community. I have many, many, many books from my library that I can bring, but this is one of the greatest human histories, written in the 1960s, a classic. And he talks about the story of human civilization on planet Earth is the story of the breakthroughs towards greater and greater power for ourselves. So the first really big breakthrough, the monumental one, apart from all those little ones that you saw already leading us up to this point, like how we got our two hands and how we began to manipulate stones and other tools around us, it's when we figure out how to grow our own food, how to take the animals, the cows and the sheep and the goats and the pigs and the horses and all of them, and begin to use them for our purposes. They become the beasts of burden. And this happened in the heartlands of the world. Specifically, it happened in one of the most rich, agriculturally rich areas on planet Earth. Do you know where that is? Can you answer that question? Mesopotamia. If you look at that map and you kind of orient yourself to it and you start to zero in on what is called now Iraq, or here, I'll get my little cursor, but I'll try and do it orally so it goes a little bit faster. If you take a look at Africa and you go all the way up to Egypt, and then you go just a little bit further and you see Iran and Iraq. And then you kind of go west a little bit and you're moving towards the Mediterranean Ocean. Do you all see that? I'm going to direct you this way, but I want to make sure, because I'm taking you to the place where this happened. That's so important. The greatest heartland on planet Earth. So does everybody have their eyes on Iraq? Do you see Iraq there? Okay, it's small. Take a look at Libya in northern Africa. Take a look at the Mediterranean Ocean, and I'll kind of go a little bit here, okay? Here we go. This will help you. Sorry, it might be a little small, but now we're getting somewhere, okay? So I'll step away and make sure I'm seeing what you're seeing. I'm technically. Everybody right now should see clearly Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Turkey, and then you go down Saudi Arabia and Egypt, right? There are two rivers that come out of the Persian Gulf that go into Iraq. One's called the Tigris and one's called the Euphrates. You might have heard of them before. Around 10,000 years ago, when civilization began, the humans who were living there, in between these two rivers, that's what Mesopotamia means. Land between two rivers. It's Greek for land between two rivers. Mesopotamia. In that area, between those two rivers, the soil was extremely rich from the rivers that were irrigating the soil. And as a result, humans could begin to grow seeds that we were taking out of the wild onto farms. But they didn't just do that in what we call Mesopotamia. That was the first place. It was done in these heartlands, which are river valleys, areas in the world where there are great rivers that can be then, the soil around them can be irrigated. Olive?
How do you spell Mesopotamia? And two, aren't we also still finding new ways of how they used to do agriculture?
Yes, we are. But this is the most important known information that we have. Mesopotamia is Meso, M-E-S-O, which is middle, Meso, Po, P-O, T-A-M-I-A, Mesopotamia. land between two rivers. Some of the things I'm telling you now in this quick review are probably things you've heard before, but you're going to hear them in a way that I think you're going to understand more deeply now. For those of you online, I'm going to wait for a moment before I react to anything in the live chat. I've got to get this critical information down for you, and I'm going to speed through this. So essentially, starting 10,000 years ago, largely in Mesopotamia, land between Tigris and Euphrates, but also the Nile River, the great Nile River that runs through Egypt all the way down the eastern side of Africa. That's where you're going to get another civilization that's going to be growing soon too, the great Egyptian civilization, because of the Nile River. And the Chinese are going to do this with the Yangtze and Yellow Rivers, and the Indians, or Pakistanis today, as we would call them, but Pakistan and India is a contemporary creation of the Second World War. There was no Pakistan or India back at this time now. It was just the Indus people, the Indus civilization. They began to grow around the Indus River or the Ganges River. And as people from India and Pakistan know here, the Ganges and the Indus, but particularly the Ganges, are sacred places for Indians. Very sacred places. It will also happen around the Gulf of Mexico, later in the Americas. So the essential point is, when we talk about civilization, we talk about how humans began to figure out in different parts of the world where there were rivers, and those rivers were irrigating the soil, how we could grow food and not have to chase after it. And that was a revolution, because it meant that we could become much more productive. Productivity. We could grow our food much faster than we were chasing after it in the wild. We increased the amount of food that we had by about 10 times the amount that we had chasing after it in the wild. Our productivity starts to grow immensely. That's agriculture. That's food production. Are you with me? Do you feel like I'm going too fast? Do you understand? If ever I ask for clarification, it's because I take very seriously the fact that I think, including myself, that most of us are ignorant of the human story on planet Earth. It hasn't been taught to us properly. I had to learn this on my own with some revolutionary historians in my own library, and this is a new field. But the reason I'm passionate about this is because we're at a crossroads in the 21st century. We now are living through a period in history where we have to understand what it means to be human and what makes us special. Otherwise, we may lose that to our machines. So I take very seriously the idea that we need to know who we are as humans, what makes us human, and how we built this planet-wide technological civilization, how we did that, so we can understand the forces behind this and control them into the future so that we don't make mistakes. We don't have wars where there's going to be terrible, terrible destruction with our weapons of mass destruction. I want us to understand who we are as humans on this planet. And I'm afraid that story has not been told very well to anybody, really, in our schools. And that's kind of why I stop and I want to make sure you understand. The next big breakthrough towards the realization of greater power that will become the essence of civilization, building on the achievements of food production, is something that happened around 5,000 years ago. Now, forgive me, just because I want to check in with the students who watch this. You probably should know this, Nora, Roxalana, Avery, Rose, but if you don't, it's okay. After food production, based on that recorded lecture, what seemed to be the next big breakthrough that humans developed that's going to become essential to civilization. Do you remember, Nora? That's
So there is a place where these meats stored food to distribute.
actually, that's more than I wanted. Okay, you're going into a little bit of how we began to create government, which I can help you with. The God King, the rise of the God King. That's coming a little bit later. I'm going to stick to the really, really simple stuff. Roxalana? There you go. Got it. We're at a very, very high level right now. Okay, so try and you're right in that you're giving good detail to what happened with food production as we created granaries and surpluses of food, and we had to figure out who was going to get that food, and we had to appoint a chief to make that decision. And that's why we chose in the end not a woman but a man. And women are going to get sidelined in history now, which is a terrible mistake that we finally are correcting in the last 200-300 years. But that's something else. Roxalana is right. This is something I like to spend just a little bit of time on, and I can maybe do it this way. Roxalana, would you feel comfortable coming up here at the podium in front of the microphone and telling the students what we did, what we actually figured out? Would you want to try? Excellent. Come on up, okay? That's great. And Roxalana is going to try and explain about 5,000 years ago. This took place in Mesopotamia first. And we're going to get our first written language called cuneiform. You want to write that down? Cuneiform. Cuneiform. But think of the moments now of how we humans begin to figure this out, how we can start to write. Roxalana is going to explain this, and I will help her, but go ahead, okay?
Over to how you spell that, please.
Cuneiform. Cuneiform, okay? So we'll do this together, all right? Go ahead, Roxalana. Yeah.
Okay, so what I got from the lecture was that we needed to write down where like all the food was going to go. That's why we had those god kings that decided where it would all go. And I learned
Yes.
that we started with hieroglyphics first, I think.
No, not how. That's later in Egypt.
Okay.
We're before that, okay? But I'll help you.
And yeah, so the god kings had kind of like assistants who would help them and write down where all the food would go. And then that kind of started a hierarchy.
Yes.
Because the more people that had more food, and they were like the higher ups, all that. And these god kings kind of got to decide who got the less amount of food, which then put them to the lower class.
Oh.
And then we
Good.
started with a pen on hard clay.
This is the cool part. Okay, really cool part. So imagine this is a pen. It's a piece of grass, like a hard piece of grass from a riverside, hard piece. And then it's sort of shaved down so it gets a bit of an edge. It's called a stylus. And then what did we start to do with that?
We started like carving it onto clay and then waiting for it to dry.
Exactly. And then when you had it on the clay tablet that dried, that's cuneiform. What would we do with that clay tablet? Would we store it somewhere, or would we hold on to it?
I think we would hold on to it.
Wouldn't
I want
we?
to say
Want to?
because we have ones that were made. There was
Yes.
the video of that guy who he
Irving
was talking
Finkel,
about them. Yeah.
the great historian, the British Library, describing all about that. And
Yeah.
Roxalana, that's great. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
Just that this kind of allowed knowledge to be shared to a wide variety of people.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's really all I
Critical.
have about that.
Okay. Come on. Thank you, Roxalana.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to help. If any of you want to come up and help with the story, by all means. But let's move along. Essentially, what she said is right, and she gave more information too that will help us. But the very important part here is that you need to understand that writing came long after speaking. About 75,000 years ago, going back a little bit, as we were coming out of Africa. Remember, we started in Africa, we move out of Africa, following animals, and we start to spread around the planet. That's where we emerged. And that's why I like to spend a little time on Africa, because Africa, you may not realize, is a critical continent in the story of humanity. But there's a terrible story to tell about slavery and exploitation. That's coming later. But we all start in Africa. And we moved out of Africa. And as we were moving out of Africa, following the animals, life is beginning to get a little more complicated, and we start to speak to one another, to convey more complicated information. We weren't writing at all. Fast forward to what Roxolana just said. 70,000 years later or so, in the great heartland, Mesopotamia, with the development of food production or agriculture, life is getting a little more complicated now. We have 10 or 15,000 humans living in little city-states around the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. And we have all these farmers working the land, bringing grain, millet, barley, and others into the city where there's a god king, a ruler who's storing all of this stuff in what's called a granary or a ziggurat, eventually. Ziggurat, ziggurat. And the god king, the man, always the man, become a very corrupt man, by the way. You'll see, we men have a lot to learn about things in life. Anyhow, the god king needs a record of all that's being brought to him, because he's the one who has to give out the grain to all the people in the community. He's the one we have entrusted with the decision-making power. He's the one who seems so kind of smart, almost divine. There's no religion yet, but there's the king who seems to be kind of God-like. He seems to be the giver of all the good weather and the food, but he was human. He couldn't remember everything. So eventually, in his court, there were individuals who began to figure out how to take what we were talking about. Nora brings in her amount of grain and barley. It's like Hunger Games. How many of you have seen Hunger Games? Okay, this is where Hunger Games gets a lot of its stuff. So come in with the tribute. Hunger Games tribute, the term tribute. What's that?
Are you away from the microphone?
Thank you, Kevin. You bring in all of this barley and millet that you've grown, Nora, and you're bringing it to the granary in this little place called Lagash, a little city-state, or it could even be Babylon. And you bring it to the king to store in this granary, but you bring him more because you want to pay him respect for his power. That's tribute. But then you have to wait, even though you have grown all this food, you have to wait for him to decide how much you're going to get. This is the beginning of slavery. World historians have asked this very peculiar question. Why would all of these wonderful Noras out there on the farmlands who are growing all this food, why would they allow themselves to bring all that to somebody who would tell them how much they can have? Why wouldn't you just keep it to yourself? Keep it for yourself. Because you were afraid. You were afraid of a flood. You were afraid of some kind of natural disaster that's going to destroy your farmland. And you felt that this man, this king, he could fight off the forces that would bring you disaster. And so you just keep bringing him food, bringing him food. Does that make sense? It's called tribute. Writing emerged as a way for the god king to control the people more. The individuals in the king's court who learned how to keep a record of how much you brought to him. Nora, you've got all this barley and millet. I'm going to hold you to it. We're going to make a record of how much you brought to us. And next time you come to us, you're going to have to bring us more. They will have that tablet. And they will store that tablet in what will become a library. You will never learn how to write, Nora, not for a long, long time. But they will know, those in power, and they will use that new technology, writing, to control you even more. Does that make sense? You will remain illiterate and kind of stupid, but hardworking, ready to serve the god king. And the god kings, wherever they may be, whether it's in Mesopotamia, land between two rivers, whether it's in Africa, deeper into Africa, whether it's in ancient China or India or the Americas or anywhere in the world where there was the beginning of food production, there was tribute. We humans, everywhere we were, even when we weren't even connected to one another yet, figured out agriculture, figured out writing, had no interest in democracy, but developed hierarchy. Hierarchy. God king at the top, master of the granary. He seems sort of divine. He will help with everything, make our lives peaceful and secure and protect us as long as we bring him the food, show him respect. And so what you have at the beginning of civilization, and I'm just reviewing here, okay, and I've gone a little too far, but you have a series of very critical turning points. Your first assignment, the directions, if you've read them, is I'm asking you to identify 3 critical moments in the story of humans on planet Earth that you believe are vitally important. One of them may come from civilization, maybe 2. It's up to you to decide. But turning points, agriculture or food production, turning point, writing, turning point, the beginning of government, which was essentially, we would say, this is a strong word, but it does apply, autocracy, dictatorship. Autocracy, autocracy, the rule of one man rule, the chief. This chief soon is going to become an emperor. And the emperor is going to become all the people you've heard about in history, like Julius Caesar, Alexander the Great, Napoleon Bonaparte, Hitler, Stalin, all of these very, very cruel and corrupt men in power that we love to have there because we want to be safe. Because we're afraid of being free. You're going to see, as civilization grows, that democracy was nowhere in sight. Freedom was nowhere in sight. The people of Mesopotamia and Egypt that would come, they didn't even have a word for freedom. Well, all of it's a very good question, but freedom and liberty do not come naturally to humans in society. We've won those things, but that's coming later. Early on in these societies that were beginning to form in Mesopotamia, around the Tigris and Euphrates, in China, around the Yellow and Yangtze, in the Indus and Ganges, India, in the further part of the Americas, across the Atlantic Ocean, with the Gulf of Mexico. We chose a form of government that was infantile. We put a big papa in charge, a big daddy who's going to keep us all safe. And eventually, it's going to take us a few thousand years. You're going to see how that happens with the democratic revolutions that led to the Industrial Revolution and the 21st century. We're going to figure out we don't need the kings. We don't need those men in power or those women who become like men, like Cleopatra. What we want is to be our own priest, our own chief, our own ruler, our own king. We want human rights. We want to be respected. That's coming later. Early on in human civilization, we had food production, we had writing, and we had hierarchy and autocracy. But Awakenings of Power, this new chapter that I want to set you up for, is when we begin to break this paradigm. So essentially, what you saw last week with the beginning of civilization in that talk was me trying to show you the breakthroughs towards power that will begin to form the basis of our societies that grow around rivers, that will soon connect into empires. And they all, wherever you were in the world, starting about 10,000 years ago, they all kind of had common traits, even though they weren't sharing much. And that was agriculture, that was writing, that was a government that was sort of built around one man who was a god king. And this would have continued unless we humans began to change. And that's what Awakenings of Power is, the next chapter in the story. I'm going to stop for a moment and make sure that everybody feels like they understand. There's a lot of ground to cover, but I'm trying to just stick to the very critical information here. Awakenings of Power is when we're going to begin to create a new way of living together and understanding our purpose on this planet. And it will be the birth of science. There was no science really in Mesopotamia. There was some curiosity about the stars and the heavens, but what you're about to see is when we begin to grow up. When I talk about Awakenings of Power, which is the next chapter, I'm just sort of setting this up for you now. I'm not going to give a full lecture on it. That's recorded for you. What I'm talking about is empowerment. It's when the human begins to realize that we don't need a God king. It's when the human begins to realize that these gods that we've created in early human societies, as I've described them, there was no official religion yet. There was no Islam. That comes hundreds of years. It comes after Jesus, 700 years after Jesus of Nazareth. Does Islam form in the Saudi Arabian Peninsula? That's going to come last in the monotheistic religions. There isn't even an understanding of a single God yet in Mesopotamia. The idea of religion and of what our purpose is was largely one that we saw through the God King, serving the God King, serving the man in power. And the way we looked at our purpose on this planet was that there were multiple gods. There was no single god in any society yet. There would be a god of the moon, the god of the sun, the god of good harvest, the god of love, the god of even down to sometimes the most minute things, like, the god of rust. Literally, there was in Roman society, the Romans were pagans. They believed they had so many different gods, and there was a god of rust. And if you wanted to get rid of rust, you had to kind of pray to the god of rust to get rid of the rust. They had hundreds of gods. Awakenings of power is when we begin to awaken to, first, the idea of a single God. Now, Hindus, Buddhists, Zoroastrians, and indigenous cultures may be angry with me at the moment by saying that the breakthrough of believing in one single God is unfair because there are many other peoples on this planet who continue to believe in multiple gods. But the reason I say that the breakthrough is to one God, or what we call monotheism, that's going to lead to the formation of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the principal world faiths right now, is because I want you to understand that in this awakening to power that you're about to see, we're going to see the human imagination begin to accelerate. Think of the imagination it took observing nature to go, over there's a fire, lightning is striking those trees, and there's a big combustible fire. Maybe I, the human, can recreate that fire, which is what we did. We watched these huge creatures, these bison, woolly mammoth, saber-toothed tigers. There used to be saber-toothed tigers roaming around the Americas here 15,000 years ago. We killed them all off because we figured out, well, maybe if we come together and we hunt it, we can kill it. Humans have imagination. They can see things in advance. And we started to imagine, well, maybe there is this single one God that has sort of put us all here. And there will be a person who emerges that you will see in the recorded lecture called Abraham. He's the patriarch of the three great single God faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. He will be the one who introduces humanity to the idea of a single God. When you watch the recorded lecture, Awakening Power, what you are going to see are the awakening to two great forces that humans have created, two great intellectual forces that they've created with their imaginations: religion and science. Religion has been humans' attempt to understand who put us here. What is nature? How should we deal with that force, nature, that seems greater than us? But then science is going to come along now in the Greco-Roman world, largely created by the Greeks. And science is different than religion, but it still comes from the human mind, the human imagination, which is humans are going to start to look into nature and they're going to go, what's really happening with that fire over there, that lightning that just struck that tree? Yes, we could say there's a God that made that happen, and we should worship him, and we'll come up with a name for that God, the God of lightning, and we'll make sure we pray to that God. That's religion. Science is, how does that lightning really work? What's causing that lightning exactly? And when we look up at the moon, why is it sometimes when we see sort of the sun move in front of the moon, we seem to see a curve around the moon? Does that mean that maybe we're round here and we're round like all the other things? And science is the attempt to understand nature as it is with critical thinking. and to prove it.
Isn't all
These are two great forces for humans that are about to change us on this planet.
one half?
Science and religion. They are called the two greatest intellectual forces. Science and religion were not created by your dog or the squirrels or even a very intelligent whale or the dinosaurs that were here for 150 million years or the dolphins and the elephants and all those very intelligent creatures. Science and religion were created by us, by our imagination, by our desire to know. That's coming. That's called power. When you start to understand religion, and I don't care whether you're a Muslim, a Jew, a Christian, a Buddhist, a Hindu, a Sikh, you understand faith, the power of faith, and that will motivate you and drive you. And it doesn't matter who your prophet is, whether it's Jesus dying on the cross, whether it's Muhammad racing across the Middle East, establishing new empires across Europe, establishing this idea of jihad and being a warrior, or whether it's a Jew who believes so much in the Torah and the written word, or whether it's a Buddhist who believes in meditation. All these religions all have something in common. They give us power. Go talk sometime to the believer. Doesn't matter if it's a Christian or a Muslim. Wait till you see the power in that person, in their eyes, in their belief. They will kill. They will die for that. But then, put that aside. Go to the scientist. Stephen Hawking. You know who Stephen Hawking is? Do you remember that incredible physicist who's no longer with us, in his wheelchair, a quadriplegic, a physicist? You know who he is. He couldn't speak unless he had a machine speaking for him, right? Talk about an intense desire to live and give. He could have given up easily and said, look at how I am suffering. But he found a way. And you know why he found a way? Because he believed so much in the power of science. He wanted us to understand what is really happening in the cosmos, what the birth of the universe was, the Big Bang was, what gravity is, how things really are. Do you understand the difference between science and religion now? Or do you feel like you're confused? Because when you're going to see this talk I'm about to give you with specifics, I will be talking about awakening to science and religion in a very, very deep way. And the religion will be the awakening to a single God. Allah, as the Muslims call him. Allah, Allah. You know, Jews will it's another name. Christians have the Trinity, but then there's Jesus, who's the Son of God. And anyways, Avery Rose.
Like I understand what you're saying, it's more of a comment.
Okay, go ahead. Do you want to come up and speak so they can all hear you? Why don't you come up and speak a little bit, okay? Like Roxalana did, because you've been writing really well. And then they can hear you, and I don't have to try and make this thing work so well, okay? Okay, so just go and stand in front of the laptop, and you can talk to me. At least they can hear you.
Okay, well, it's just what you were talking when you were talking about, like the single God versus the pantheon, especially to like the pantheons. I couldn't. Well, I'm a writer. I love stories, especially from ancient times, and it got me thinking of mythology. Like
Yes,
out of the
yeah,
pantheons came mythology. It was their way of, before science became prominent.
Yes, yes.
Or even almost at the same time, mythology was their way of explaining how the world was. Like
That's right.
Ancient Greek is the most prominent, but it was their way of trying to figure out how the world works and why things happen. Like the story of Hades and Persephone, it was their way of explaining the cycle of the season,
Yes.
for example. And then outgrew stories like Medusa, Perseus, the three fates, Hercules.
Absolutely.
And that's just in Greece. In Egypt, you have the Egyptian gods, Thoth, Anubis, Set.
Multiple gods,
like-
all these different
And
gods.
as a writer and an artist, the mythologies have always fascinated me, especially since they created the first stories, the first plays, the first forms of art out of, aside from the paintings that we made on our walls, our carvings.
Yes.
It's just
But
I-
that's not science, is it?
I
Mythology is not science.
I know that. I'm just it's just something that came to my mind when you were talking about faith and science. Like around this time, the other things came about, things
Yes.
that we even still use to. A lot of our stories, a lot of our plays are either like have evolved out of those early forms, or we're still using, like I know a lot of stories are still using references to those early mythologies, those characters, like Hades and Persephone, for instance. You see them in Hades Town.
Okay, well, let me stop you for a second. Let me stop you for a second. This is just because I want to make sure you understand the differences between this and science. But
I understand what the difference is.
how would you define the difference between science and religion? This is really, really important, because when we're awakening to power, as you're about to see, we're awakening increasingly to the power of religion, and mostly the power of science, because science drives our world. Science and technology. Technology are tools created from scientific knowledge. Science is the knowledge. Technology is the application of science. That's the tool. So it's to be able to understand the difference between science and religion, you will then start to understand power in this world. Yeah. So what's the difference again between science and religion?
I'm having trouble finding the words. It's almost like something that you know, but it's almost hard to explain or put in words, or at least that's what I'm doing. Like science is, I'm trying to figure it out.
You know what
Like,
science is? Science is, you want to try? Proven. That's right. Keep going.
Versus religion, where you kind of just like worship, you worship something overly, and then you kind of just religion. Where science, you don't really worship, you kind of think, how is this proven? How does this happen?
Science is based on
Thank
evidence,
you.
on experimentation.
You
right?
explained what I was
good.
what I
Okay.
was trying to say.
Science is exactly proof. We want proof. Oh, I hear things lighting up. I'll take care. You can go back, Ivy Rose. Thanks. Okay, give her. All of you, hopefully, will come up. Making an opportunity of a crisis. I'm bringing students up like this, and I happen to love it when the student comes up and shows their knowledge, and we can talk. Hold on. We have in the live chat, there's been some comments here, and I just want to quickly check. Okay, it's more just concurring, and then someone has to leave. Fair enough.
Someone was trying to raise their hand. It looked. but
Was there? Okay.
I saw at least two different ones trying to raise their hand, but it looks like they're gone now.
Okay. Is there anything you want to say, Olive, or to comment, or are you
No,
good?
I was just trying to figure out.
Figure there. Okay.
Sorry about that.
I want to sort of remember that we have only a certain amount of time, and I want to give you lots of time to be ready for your discussion post and your first assignment. So I'm going to try and begin to sort of conclude today and just remind you of what I've been doing, which is I've reviewed Civilization, that chapter. I'm setting you up for Awakenings of Power, and you're going to watch one of the recorded lectures for about an hour between now and next week, as you did for civilization. I'm going to post that later today for you, okay? So I'm just setting you up here for some important details that you need to watch in the recorded lecture, and that is largely Greece. You're going to see the story of Greece, but in a very introductory way. And you're going to meet some important people too, the great Greek philosophers, you know, the critical ones like Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, and learn about Pericles, who brought democracy or the beginnings of democracy into ancient Athens. You're going to see how the idea of democracy began to develop. That's a very different concept of how we govern ourselves. No God king. So I'm just introducing you to what you have to watch, okay? And so as long as that's clear, I'm going to start to just sort of wrap up some of these critical thoughts, largely around, again, this idea of awakening to power. And do you feel like you're beginning to understand what I mean by power for the human? What's going to give the human? Oh, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, you see how it's, it's too many, not enough bandwidth, and I'm getting old, okay? Olive?
I actually want to ask something so we can finish off on the notes here.
Sure.
What is the earliest recorded notation of religion? Like, if you could set a time, what would you?
Great question. Well, you know, if we have to define the spirit world, and we have to then define religion, because religion is a kind of organization of our ideas around the spirit world. So we're talking about, when did we start to have this desire for worshiping things that are beyond us? When did we start to imagine the idea of gods? That actually predates science and really predates even the beginning of civilization, around 15,000 years ago.
Thank you.
Yeah, around, we say that because some of the most early archaeological discoveries lately are beginning to find these settlements that humans created before there was Mesopotamia and cities, just little settlements where human clans, small groups of humans would come together and they would build these stone monuments, stone things that they would go and they would worship. And we were beginning to sort of have this, it actually, Olive, goes back to something very, very important. I talk about it in a recorded lecture, but I don't think I posted this for you. Put this date down, 200,000 years ago. This is a breakthrough. And I'm going to leave you with this thought. It is said that around 200,000 years ago, the very early human that was already hunting, was soon to leave Africa and begin to spread across the planet, was sort of beginning to talk. But at that point, that human 200,000 years ago was exactly the same as we are in terms of the anatomy. The brain size was the same, the limbs, everything. It just didn't have culture yet, but it was anatomically human. Homo sapien. We humans began to ask ourselves a question, and this is really what Olive will help you to understand how far back this idea of the spirit world goes. No other animal on this planet has the capability to ask themselves this question and act on it. If you watch a squirrel dealing with death, you will see a squirrel standing beside a dead squirrel for maybe 10 seconds, and then it moves on. But humans, 200,000 years ago or so, we were beginning to bury our dead. And we were asking ourselves a question. Our awareness had grown. Our brains had grown. We had imagination and vision. Why do we die? What you mean our time here is short and then we get buried? So if we're here for a short period and we're not here forever, then what the hell are we supposed to be doing here? Oh, what is our purpose? What are we meant to be doing on this planet? This is the real origin, Olive, of religion. It's asking, what are we supposed to be doing here? What should we do with this thing called life if we're going to die and we're gone forever? And we were conscious of that. We saw that when someone stopped breathing and they were here, like they were gone forever, and we were burying them out of respect because we knew that they were no longer part of this world on planet Earth. And that is really the beginning of when we start to wonder about gods and God and nature and our purpose. We can connect it to that time, Olive, when we begin to wonder, why are we here if we die? Does that make sense? It's called mortality. And there's a great classic book called The Epic of Gilgamesh. It's one of the great works of world literature very early on, where it chronicles the story of a god king in Mesopotamia who doesn't want to die. He wants to be immortal. And even the Egyptian pharaohs desired greatly to be immortal too. Humans, even the ones who are most powerful, have had to confront the idea that they are not immortal.
Didn't we start off this entire class with talking about how they were Putin and the Chinese lady were talking about?
And you've got a good memory, Olive. Excellent. Remember when I told you, I think it was last week, I'll leave this with this. Over a hot mic recently, when Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, and the Chinese premier Xi Jinping were together at a big show of military force in Beijing, the Chinese were showing the world all of their tanks and their weapons, and Russia was there because China is the big power next to the US, and China is supplying Russia with a lot of its support for its war in Ukraine. So Putin is always going to China. You never see Xi Jinping go to Russia. So Putin, apparently, it was reported, they're walking together on a red carpet, and Putin is saying to Xi Jinping, I heard that, they've got these organs now you can get, and it can extend your life to 150 years or something. You could maybe live even longer. This is what happens to these men in great positions of power. They get a little delusional. Anyways, I better stop. And I hope that you've begun to understand this idea of what we're about to awaken to in Greece. Most importantly, the power of science. When you leave the class today and you're holding your device, your phone, your laptop, your ATM, you go, do you know what's driving all of that stuff? Electronics. What's electronics? The electron. Do you know what the electron is? It's a subatomic particle. Religion can't help you to understand that. But scientists figured it out about 150 years ago. Well, there's this electron that's floating around the nucleus where the protons and neutrons are. It's there. We've never really seen it. It moves so fast, it just zips around like a bumblebee. We've just seen its tail. And then in the 20th century, you get the engineers and the technologists and the industrialists who take that knowledge of the electron, they put it into a transistor. That transistor gets put into a microprocessor. That microprocessor gets put on a chip. And before long, look at all the power you have at your fingertips. All because we figured out how to take the electron out of nature and put it into that thing. That's what we humans do. We understand the natural world as it really is, and we grab that thing. Imagine being alive 50 years, 100 years from now, how much more we're going to discover in the natural world. We will be different creatures. Okay? Are you confused, or do you feel you understand? Any questions? Any questions for the cosmos out there? Looks like the cosmos is getting empty of planets. But anyways, there are other solar systems and galaxies that these planets can go to, and maybe we will too. Okay, everybody. Thank you, Olive, and I'll, save those notes. And remember, I will post that Awakenings of Power talk where I spoke from my office at home. There's some good notes that I give you in that. I recorded that lecture during the pandemic as well. So next week, I'm going to come, and after Awakenings of Power, next week is Spells of Our God Kings. We're going to start a new chapter, and you're going to see how sad it is that Alexander the Great, living just north of Greece, came down and took all the great Greek knowledge and used it for conquest. War. Lots of war coming. Okay, see you next week. Thanks. Okay, so I think we have a recording. I'm going to end the live stream. Shamim, Arifa, Eva, Zil, I'm going to be signing out here from the podium. Would you like to say anything before I end this class?
I do have a question that might relate to.
Sure, Nora. Yeah, thanks, Eva. Yep. Please sign. Yeah, on board. Excellent. You remember because I forgot. I did. Good. All of you get your name up there too. Make sure you put your name up. Yeah, everybody. That's your attendance, 5 out of 5, plus your question on the discussion board, right? Okay. Just ask the question. Ask, and please make sure it comes from the human brain and not the machine, Chat GPT. Promise? Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
So I wasn't able to log on the online crap. I'm
Yeah.
not technology smart.
Okay. Let me
I-
shut this so we have a private. It's not being recorded. Okay. So I'm going to end here the live stream. Just a second.